Shalom and welcome again by yours truly, Hakam Yar ben-Emmett of the Torah Watchman Show International LLC non-for-profit company. Hope everyone's been well. I have a very interesting video here. It does not have anything to do directly with the Torah, but indirectly, what I have to talk about is grandfathered from the laws of Moshe. Where am I going? I'm talking to you tonight about the Fifth Amendment. Does anyone know what the Fifth Amendment was or is, right? You've heard most people, unfortunately, if you've been arrested or something like this, or you have a friend or relative been arrested, you heard about Miranda rights, right? Or if you go to court and you're accused of a crime, you are allowed, before you give testimony, you're allowed to plead the Fifth, because you have the right not to incriminate yourself before your peers. But anyway, why this historical lesson about the Fifth Amendment is very, very important, what's happening in our country today. Everyone has seen a newspaper or watched the news, no matter what political party affiliation or none at all that you may have, you know what's happening in Minnesota. You know what President Donald J. Trump has done, whether you agree with it or not. Many people just literally hate ICE. I'm not talking about the ice in your favorite glass of Southern iced tea. What I'm talking about is an immigration authority that was set up shortly after that horrible, horrific terrorist attack in 9/11. Our memory kind of is foggy over the period of years, and we forget why something is so critically important as in federal officers working for the Department of Homeland Security, known as the Organization of the Federal Government as ICE. Now, back to the Fifth Amendment. The founding author was none other was James Madison. He's actually well known as the father of the U.S. Constitution, because he's the Fifth Amendment is the core of our Bill of Rights, our freedoms as people of the United States, of legal persons per se, and that's where I'm going here. Now, James Madison, he authored the Fifth Amendment primarily, wrote most of it. However, he was strongly a proponent against the majority of the 1798 Alien and Seditions Act. So I believe the Fifth Amendment was written around 1791, but 1798, he got into arguments with Thomas Jefferson, I believe, over the Alien and Seditions Acts. He and Thomas Jefferson actually supported one specific part of that, known as the Alien Enemies Act. When our country is at war, it gives more constitutional authority to the executive branch, namely the U.S. President of America, to have more authority than he would usually have in non-war status. So, quickly, the Alien Immigration and Insurrection Act refers to a suite of 4 laws passed under President John Adams during the Quasi-War of France, okay? Madison's opposition was nuanced across the different acts. Now, James Madison is probably revered more by progressive liberals, progressive socialists today, namely our Democratic Party, which has gone far left of Tip O'Neill days of Blue Dog Democrats. You know, they revere him very much. So in other words, since James Madison historically was very much against President Trump's opinion and using the Alien Immigration Insurrection Act to declare whole groups and organizations of people that are aliens to our country, who are not U.S. citizens, who are undocumented, not naturalized, no passport, no green visa card or tourist visa, student, whatever, no social security number registration. They're true aliens in our country. When they are committed acts of criminality, either or both in their host country, say Venezuela, coming to our country and then committing crimes, namely murders, rapes, and sexual abuses of minors. And I'm not even have to mention the drug cartels that's most widely known. And you know what happened when Donald Trump authorized the U.S. military to take out
Nicolas Maduro,
the criminal there, to remove him from the head of all these drug cartels out of Venezuela, to give Venezuela a time to cool down and have a democratic election. And I think they actually appointed a president, would-be president, but the military government that was in control at that time was in direct affiliation with Russia and China and Iran, was a big anti-Semite who supported Hamas and other terrorist actors, selling drugs to justify other acts around the world that were just criminality. So you understand a little bit about that. Why does someone like President Trump, whether you love him or hate him or indifferent, why he would need something like the Aliens, Immigration, Insurrection Act to declare as terrorists one or more of these organized drug cartels and criminal gangs like MS-13 and etc. under this Insurrection Act as a quasi declaration of war by these criminal elements. If you remember 9/11, the Afghanistan war, there was no organized government per se in Afghanistan, pre-9/11. It was controlled by a number of terrorist actors, namely the Taliban and Al-Qaeda. So we had a roughly high-level declaration of war on terror, but there was no internationally recognized government in Afghanistan at that time for us to declare war. And you could say that if Al-Qaeda was found in our nation during that time, especially after 9/11, and the FBI was very active in every mosque and every Muslim community just for checks and balances and see if there was another planned terrorist attack against the homeland. This is what was happening at that time. We have used these things. And so far, since 1798, the U.S. Supreme Court has not declared the Alien Immigration Insurrection Act as unconstitutional, or the Alien Enemies Act that both James Madison and Thomas Jefferson did support in a time of a declaration of war. Unfortunately, in our country, after World War II, we no longer declared war against any nation state or organization of criminality that's foreign to our homeland or in our homeland from a foreign country. We never declared war through the will of the people in Congress. For me, as a Federalist myself and as an independent, even though I voted Republican for a number of years, I'm against that. I believe the president should have declared war against Venezuela before he took XYZ military acts against Venezuela. If he takes military action against Iran, I think he should have declared, at least short-term, war against Iran. Now, by the Constitution, a president can do essentially whatever he wants to for the sake of national security within the first 60 days. But it was more than 60 days, and we have military in Venezuela, and we were targeting drug cartel boats that was taking lethal drugs into our country, from South America to North America through Mexico, and China was helping with some of these sub-ingredients and components of these high quality drugs, where just one grain of something could kill hundreds of Americans. Now we got that out of the way. The title of this video, does ICE need arrest warrants? 9 out of 10 Democrats, except Senator Fetterman of Pennsylvania, whom I love, my fellow Jew, believes yes, they do need arrest warrants. Why? Before they go and arrest a known criminal, illegal alien. I'm not talking about any undocumented immigrant. I'm talking about someone who's committed crimes in our country, who is in the planning stages of committing crimes, or has arrest warrants through Interpol internationally, who murdered people in their host countries. Those kind of people that the Democrats believe, and the Miranda rights per se, and we'll get into this in more detail, that they believe that they have the same constitutional rights as you and me as law-abiding U.S. citizens. That is their belief. But why do they believe this? Let's get in a little bit more in the Fifth Amendment, and I'll let you know, not my opinion, but what the document actually says at a high level. When you think about the Fifth Amendment again, you think about your Miranda rights, okay? You have a right to a lawyer. If you don't have funds, money to appoint a lawyer, the court, the state, or whatever will appoint a lawyer for you at the taxpayer expense, okay? You think about the Bill of Rights, the freedoms. That's what's so unique and so beautiful about our democratic republic, as you could say. It ensures fundamental fairness through the following clauses: the right against self-incrimination. I already said that at the beginning of this video. Due process clause there. Double jeopardy protection. You cannot be charged with the same crime twice if you were not convicted. Grand jury clause. And then something called the takings clause, or eminent domain, stipulates that the government cannot take private property for public use without providing just compensation. And many people have known people in the past, and I have too, living in the South, in Louisiana, per se, that's where I'm from, born and raised there. If you needed to expand, say, Interstate 20, that runs through northern Louisiana, going to Mississippi, another way going to Texas. If there is a house that's along the side and they need to expand that lane of traffic, they have eminent domain. They can demolish that house, but they have to buy that house up and give you fair market value for that house before they disadvantage you. Okay, essentially is what that is. Now, key legal context, the Miranda rights, we all know about this. I don't really need to go into any more detail. But it's well known, it's the right to remain silent. You have the right to remain silent. A lot of times you get yourself in a whole host of trouble when you are arrested by a police officer and you run your mouth. And at some point, you revoke that right for a lawyer if you self-incriminate yourself. But in many cases, many people that are arrested, and I'm talking about, killed someone, but if not read their Miranda rights, that whole case is at risk of being thrown out of court by the judge. In the scope, while the Fifth Amendment originally applied only to the federal government, most of its protections have been extended to the states through the 14th Amendment, okay? Now, civil versus criminal, this is not a legal lecture per se. I am not a legal authority. I've done a lot of research, therefore I'm doing this lecture, and I think it's very necessary and very important in this time with all the public unrest in our country against our elected president who won a landslide victory. I may not agree with everything with President Donald J. Trump, but he is the president, and I respected the presidential office politics even when Biden was president. I didn't vote for him either. I didn't like him at all, but I had to respect his office of presidency. Okay? So, the criminal trials, a jury cannot assume guilt if a defendant chooses not to testify. Okay, so if someone does not testify or called in the witness booth or whatever that you go to, and the judge asks you, do you want to come and you want to testify yourself and you're accused or something, you're not automatically assumed to be guilty, even though there's a lot of public opinion that you're hiding something, right? However, in civil cases, judges and juries, they sometimes draw adverse influences from such silence. So, you know, in many courts, and I've watched Judge Judy in court TV. I've actually gone to a police jury, been called to a police jury per se. Everyone's supposed to be eligible for that if you're registered to vote, if you're here legally in the country. Very interesting. So, now we're talking about ICE and the arrest warrants. What ICE has is something known as judicial warrants that goes all the way up to the Department of Justice. The Department of Justice is over the Department of Homeland Security. Under the Department of Homeland Security is ICE and other departments like the Secret Service, okay? And incidentally, Democrats have decided to defund all these departments, including FEMA, the Secret Service, Coast Guard, and ICE, because they are against these federal departments. I say, in my opinion, because of political reasons, and they hate the current president in office, because if they're against it, it's because they don't hate President Trump. If they are against it because they support criminal, illegal aliens and terrorists in our country, could you say that the Democratic Party, by large, supports terrorists and murderers and rapists and drug cartel members in our country? I'm talking about people in our country like ISIS and Al-Qaeda and Hamas-affiliated terrorist groups that are living illegally in 50 states of our union. Can you say the Democrats support that criminality? Or is it just that they're politically biased and they hate everything President Trump is doing? They want him out of office. That's for you. That's the court of your opinion, not mine. Now, why ICE is called in the first place with these judicial warrants to go to, say, Minneapolis, for example, that is pretty much ground zero of all the protests and what's going on right now. In fact, the president has recently removed most of ICE from there and kept a few FBI and few ICE top officials there just to clean up some court cases because of the fraud and everything else. The people accused of criminality. Americans in Minneapolis, including the mayor and the governor of the state, I'm not getting to that, but most of ICE has been removed there. And President Trump has said now on, especially for these blue states and blue cities, you have to come to me begging me to bring ICE or the FBI or the military to help you settle your crime in your cities again, and your people being murdered in the subways and all of this. You have to beg me to do that. Let your cities burn. And some of the Democrats there would rather have the cities burned, like George Floyd, burn, and people, mom and pop businesses, lose their livelihood to that, than to call out the police and do what the police were nominated to do. And if hindsight is 2020, it's our guide. If simply when ICE came to Minneapolis in the first place and they had judicial arrest warrants, not individual, but judicial arrest warrants. In other words, they had a targeted specific group of people by name. They knew these people. They knew they were in that county of that state and Minneapolis. They knew they had a holistic, overarching judicial warrant for their imminent arrest. The police, the governor, the mayor of Minneapolis ordered the police to desist. Do not help ICE, do not help the federal agents, do not help the FBI, do not engage them whatsoever. They created this firestorm of unrest, public unrest, and leading to the deaths, unfortunate deaths of 2 American citizens who resisted arrest, and one woman who weaponized her car and tried to commit vehicle homicide, who severely injured an ICE agent who had to go to the hospital because of internal injuries. Now they're shooting out tires in cars. But what I'm saying is, does ICE have the right to go and yank an illegal alien out of a car, out of a hotel, out of an apartment, out of a public place through a judicial warrant? Yes, constitutionally, by the U.S. Supreme Court, by the Department of Justice, they have that constitutional right to do that. If you do not like current U.S. immigration law, then change it. Vote, go to Congress and pass bills and everything else, change immigration law. There's been a lot of hearsay and talk as ICE fulfilled their mission statement since 9/11. ICE was formed roughly March 2003 or something like that. I'm not sure. So, continuing on, the percentage of cases of ICE, the experiments are there. Think about Texas, okay? These people are given, when they are brought into court or arrested for something, for investigation or whatever, and if a police officer touches you in any way, you're under arrest. It's not that difficult to understand. If you're speeding and your police car is behind me and you pull over and stop, and if you try to engage that police officer and resist arrest, as soon as he touches your hand and says you are under arrest and you resist that arrest, you have other crimes waiting pending against you. So if you understand that a police officer has that authority under that state or county law for arrest warrants, and for if you are resisting or trying to injure or kill that police officer, then why is it so hard to understand when a federal officer, namely the ICE organization or Department of Homeland Security, why is that any different? Now, these court cases, 9 out of 10 of these illegal aliens that are told, they're given pink slip or some paperwork, you will appear to court 3 months from now, whatever. And they don't show up. Very few of them show up. Most all, in the Biden administration, most all of the illegal aliens, or whatever you want to call illegal immigrants that came across Mexico and other countries in Latin America, came over, they claimed asylum. And Biden gave just a broad brush approval of that. But they were given paperwork when they made that claim of asylum, and most of that was just false claims of asylum. Why? How quickly? If you don't claim asylum in the first country you cross the border, then the asylum by international law is thrown out. It's thrown out completely. So there's a high appearance of rates of represented individuals, and contrast research into the backlog of 3.7 million pending cases suggests that most don't return claim may not even apply to anyone. You imagine how much money it would take to have individual arrest warrants for all these illegals. I'm talking about tens of millions of illegals. How much money of your taxpayer dollars it costs, and how much backlog how many lawyers and judges you would have to appoint. This would take decades to resolve, okay? The so-called asylum seekers, individuals pursuing active relief, most of these people, about 92 to 95%, were making these claims, and most of them were false in the end, okay? Now, there was a high rate in absentee on all these individual arrest warrants back in the Biden administration. Now, Trump is reading the law. He has lawyers, and the Department of Justice gives them their legal opinion all the time, what the U.S. Constitution actually says, and how much executive power he actually has in a time if he's declared a national emergency, because you had millions of people that were in this country. You didn't know what their medical status was. You didn't know if they were members of one or more terrorist organizations, or if they were planning like Al-Qaeda or ISIS, terrorist attacks against the homeland. You did not know. There was not even a blip in the radar of the Department of National Intelligence. The U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, okay, that's what it stands for, was established in March 1st, 2003. As a critical component of newly formed Department of Homeland Security. That was their mission statement, to mitigate the real risk shortly after 9/11 of active terrorist groups, namely Al-Qaeda, in the United States in 50 states. That's why they were organized. The FBI, by their mission statement, could not be everywhere to take care of what ICE could be. Okay? And these are American citizens who have joined ICE to serve the country patriarchal. I mean, they're patriots. Most of them are. Some of them are nefarious and some have problems. Just like some police are bad cops. That's just human nature, right? You don't damn them all to hell because a few people make mistakes. Okay? So, the core evolution of structure, the mission of ICE's primary mandate was to protect national security and public safety by enforcing federal law governing border control. Why was border control important in Minneapolis? Because you had hundreds of thousands of illegals from other countries that were undocumented, many of which have committed crimes in their host countries and in this country, and had pending arrest warrant. Many of them were told, even in the Biden administration, that you will be deported, and that deportation order came and went, and they were never deported. Or when they were deported, they came back, and they went into these sanctuary cities. I'm not going to touch that. So in conclusion of this lecture, and I didn't mean to be too wordy with it, we have the Fifth Amendment. We have James Madison, the father of the U.S. Constitution. We know he didn't like the Alien Insurrection Act. He did not like it at all because it was about what qualifies a legal person. But while it was subject to debate what a legal person was in 1791, was it a U.S. citizen? Was it a colonist per se on the 13 colonies? Was it someone who actually had a job, had a birth certificate, had a baptismal certificate of something? That's how people were allowed on the Mayflower to come to America to make a new life in lieu of a passport. Some sort of paperwork, some sort of intent. We know why you're there. If you have a job and you build your own house, then you pretty much are considered a person in this country of not ill repute or ill intent. Now, there are legal citizens that commit a lot of crimes in this country. I'm not talking about that. But as far as saying that the U.S. Constitution for the Bill of Rights and everything else applies to everyone living in our country at a certain point in time, that is too broad of interpretation based on my opinion. As a 61-year-old disabled veteran, okay? Because when you think about in 1798, I believe, when the Alien Insurrection Act was passed, it clearly said this group of people are U.S. citizens. These people are not citizens, but they're in the country and they're persons in this country, according to James Madison's view in 1791 on the Fifth Amendment. Do they have the same rights? Do they fall under Miranda rights? And do they have equal clause and court of peers and appointed lawyer and all of this stuff? Do they have the right to plead the Fifth and all of this stuff? Do they? Well, that's for you to decide. But as far as criminal act by U.S. citizens against ICE because they want to protect criminal illegals in their city, that's a whole nother matter. And from my mind, that looks like insurrection. If any governor of the state opposes a court ordered by the Department of Justice a legal immigration enforcement act in their state, in one of their cities, and they oppose that, or if they try to harbor those illegals in safe houses, in churches, and places like that, this is a felony, folks. In my opinion, I think the governor of Minnesota and the mayor of Minneapolis should have been charged with insurrection, at least with felonies for harboring criminal illegal aliens. In conclusion, how would you resolve this issue? I like the proposal that went forth to the Department of Justice and Mr. Rubio and others essentially said that you can volunteer if you're here illegally, like an amnesty box. We'll give you $1,000 check or whatever. We'll fly you back to your host country. You can leave at a certain point. And if you want to come back to this country, you can do that, but through a documented legal way, not illegally crossing the border, not working with drug cartels and human traffickers to try to get in the country. Okay? Well, you can do that. But if you stay in this country and you're illegal beyond that point and you don't report who you are and that you want to volunteer to leave this country, then you will be forcibly deported by ICE. And that's what's happening today. That's what the Fifth Amendment is. That's who James Madison is. What do you think? Anyway, Hakam Yarav signing out again. God bless you. God bless America. Shalom Aleichem. Take care. Until the next time.